The night wind dragged the scent of smoke and wild sage across the camp, carrying with it a whisper that could ruin a life. "I want to spend one night of passion with you," she said, her voice trembling between fear and desire. "But there are too many people around." For a heartbeat, no sound dared follow her words. Only the fire crackled. The low murmur of distant voices rolled through the tents, and the coyotes sang somewhere beyond the hills. Evelyn March had not meant to say it aloud. She'd rehearsed it silently, again and again, ever since the evening she'd first seen the Apache warrior standing by the corral, the orange firelight wrapping his bronze skin in a glow that made him look half spirit, half man. Now the words hung between them, raw, dangerous, and impossible to take back. The man before her, Talon of the Red Sky Clan, did not move. His tall frame was carved in the light like a monument to silence. The flicker of the flames danced across his bare shoulders and the long, black strands of his hair that brushed the necklace of bone and turquoise resting on his chest. His eyes, deep as canyon shadows, regarded her without judgment, but without mercy either. "Do you understand what you ask?" he said at last. His voice was low, steady, like distant thunder crawling across the desert. Evelyn swallowed hard, clutching her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I do," she whispered, "and I don't care anymore." The wind shifted, and with it came the smells of dust, sweat, and burning pine. Beyond the edge of the fire circle, the army tents stood like pale ghosts against the dark. She could hear laughter from the soldiers, sharp, coarse laughter, the kind that always turned her stomach. She'd come west after her husband died at Shiloh, hoping the endless plains might bury her grief. But grief had followed her like a stray hound, always hungry, always watching. Talon's gaze lingered on her face. "You live among those who despise my people," he said quietly. "If they hear such words from your mouth, they will destroy you, and they will hunt me." Evelyn looked down at the dirt between them. "They already despise me," she said, "because I refuse to pretend I'm still mourning a man who left me long before the war took him." She lifted her eyes again, meeting his. "You look at me like I'm still alive. That's more kindness than I've known in years." For the first time, his expression softened barely. A faint crease at the corner of his mouth, something that might have been pain or understanding. He stepped closer. The light from the fire caught the copper in his skin, the faint sheen of sweat along his collarbone. Evelyn could feel the warmth radiating from him. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Every inch of distance between them felt electric, forbidden, sacred. "You should return to your tent," he murmured. "This camp has too many eyes." "Then take me somewhere they can't see," she said, her voice cracking as the words left her lips. "Just one night where I can forget who I am supposed to be." A long silence followed. The night held its breath. Somewhere, a horse snorted and shifted its weight. Then, before he could answer, a lantern swung through the dark. Someone was approaching, the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel, the clink of metal gear. Evelyn's heart jumped into her throat. Talon stepped back into shadow, his movements swift and silent. In an instant, he was almost invisible, just another shadow among the pines. A soldier's voice rang out, rough and lazy. "Mrs. March? You out here alone?" Evelyn forced herself to smile. "Couldn't sleep," she said, her tone light. "The fire helps." The man gave her a curious glance but said nothing more. Just tipped his hat and wandered off toward the mess tent. When his footsteps faded, Evelyn turned back toward the darkness. Talon was gone. Only the soft hiss of dying embers remained where he had stood. She let out the breath she'd been holding. Her hands trembled as she gathered her shawl tighter, the wool damp from night dew. Somewhere beyond the camp, she thought she heard the faint rustle of movement, a branch, a footstep. Or perhaps the wind itself carrying him away. The moment had lasted only seconds. But something irreversible had passed between them, something neither prayer nor punishment could undo. Evelyn turned toward the tents, her heart still pounding. She walked slowly, her boots crunching softly in the dust. The soldiers' laughter had faded. The night had swallowed every sound but her heartbeat. When she reached her tent, she stopped. From far off, beyond the line of the fires, she saw a single flame burn steady against the black ridge. His camp, his fire, and though she could not see him, she knew he was there watching her. The same way she had watched the moon through grief, through silence, through too many empty years. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn March did not feel invisible. And that was the most dangerous feeling of all. Morning came slow and golden over the camp, spilling sunlight across the valley like warm honey. Smoke rose from dying fires, and the smell of scorched coffee drifted through the thin air. Evelyn March wrapped her shawl tighter as she stepped from her tent, the fabric still carrying the faint scent of last night's fire. Where her reckless words still lingered like ghosts, every sound seemed louder this morning, the clang of metal pots, the bark of mules, the rhythmic thump of boots in dry dirt. Yet beneath it all was silence, the kind that hummed beneath her skin. She had not seen Talon since the moment he vanished into the shadows. It was as if he had melted into the night itself, but his presence clung to her, his voice, that stillness in his gaze, the warmth that had radiated from his body even through the cool wind. Evelyn felt it like an ache she couldn't name. She took the basket of bread she'd promised to deliver to the soldiers down by the river and started toward the water. The sun shimmered on the slow current, and dragonflies darted through reeds that whispered with the breeze. The air smelled of wild mint and damp clay. And then she saw him. Across the river, knee-deep in water, Talon stood bare to the waist, washing blood from a small cut on his arm. The muscles of his back flexed with each movement, the morning light tracing the strong lines of his shoulders and the dark fall of his hair. Around his neck hung the same necklace she had noticed before, bone and turquoise, glinting like tiny fragments of sky. He looked up, sensing her before she spoke. Their eyes met across the rippling surface of the river. For a moment, neither moved. Evelyn's breath caught. She wanted to turn away, to pretend she hadn't been watching, but her feet wouldn't move. There was something about his stillness, that quiet strength, that held her fast. When he finally spoke, his voice carried easily across the water. "Why do you watch me, Evelyn March?" Her name on his tongue sounded different, softer, heavier. "I didn't mean to," she lied. "I was just passing by." He smiled faintly, though his eyes did not soften. "You came looking for me?" Her heart lurched. "No." She took a step forward, then stopped, her boots sinking slightly into the mud. "I just wanted to thank you for not answering me last night." Talon tilted his head. "You thank me for refusing you?" She hesitated. "For not letting me make a fool of myself." He turned back to the river, cupping water in his hands and letting it run down his arms. "You spoke truth," he said. "It is not foolish to speak what lives in the heart." Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. The world would say otherwise. The world fears what it cannot control. His gaze lifted again, meeting hers. "Do you?" She swallowed hard. "I fear many things, Talon, but not you." He waded toward her, crossing the stream until the water reached his knees. The morning light shimmered around him, drops of water sliding down his chest like glass beads. When he stepped onto the muddy bank, she caught the scent of cedar and smoke. "You should," he said quietly. "Not because I wish you harm, but because the people around you would never forgive what they do not understand." Her pulse thudded against her throat. "You think I care for their forgiveness?" He studied her face for a long moment. Then he reached out, his fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was feather-light, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. "Careful," he murmured. "Even a whisper carries far in daylight." Behind them, Voices echoed faintly from camp, the soldiers calling orders, a woman laughing near the tents. Evelyn stepped back, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. "You should go," she said, her voice trembling. "If they see us," Talon's expression didn't change. "They will see what they wish to see." A woman speaking to a savage. Nothing more. His words cut, but not because of cruelty, because of truth. That was how they would see him, and how they would see her. Evelyn lifted her chin. "You're wrong," she said. "They'll see a woman who's finally awake." For the first time, his eyes softened firelight and sorrow all at once. "Then may you never wish to sleep again," he said. He turned and walked back across the river, water breaking around his legs, his figure dissolving into the light. Evelyn stood there long after he was gone, her heart pounding with something she didn't dare name. When she finally looked down, she realized her fingers were still trembling and that she was clutching a small turquoise bead he must have dropped in the mud. She held it tightly in her palm as she walked back toward camp, unaware that from across the ridge, Talon was watching her, his eyes the color of storm clouds, unreadable and fierce, and though she could not see him, he knew. The fire she had lit inside herself would not go out easily. The sky turned the color of bruised steel that evening. Clouds rolled low over the desert, heavy and trembling with thunder. The first drops of rain struck the dust like sparks, and soon the wind began to sing through the tents an unearthly, restless song that made the horses whinny and the lanterns sway. Evelyn March sat inside her canvas shelter, clutching her shawl, listening to the heartbeat of the storm. Her hair had come loose, her cheeks flushed with the heat trapped inside the tent. Each thunderclap echoed through her ribs, and with every roll of sound, she thought of Talon, his steady voice, his fire-lit eyes, and the way he had looked at her across the river that morning. She couldn't stop thinking about that turquoise bead. It still lay hidden in her pocket, warm from the heat of her body. She told herself it was foolish, dangerous to keep it. But every time she thought of throwing it away, her hand refused to open. The storm deepened. Rain lashed the camp, turning the ground into a river of mud. She could hear shoutsmen tying down supplies, horses breaking loose, canvas tearing in the wind. The world outside had become chaos. And somewhere in that chaos, she felt him. Evelyn rose, heart pounding, and pushed open the flap of her tent. The wind struck her face like a slap. Her dress whipped against her legs as she stepped into the storm. The camp was a blur of motion, men running, lights flickering, shadows fighting the wind. She could barely see beyond a few feet, but she knew where to go. She could smell smoke, faint but distinct cedar smoke. His kind. Lightning split the sky, revealing the ridge beyond the camp. For an instant, she saw him standing there bare to the waist, head lifted to the rain, his long hair thrashing like black fire in the wind. His arms were spread slightly, as if he welcomed the storm itself. Then the light was gone, swallowed by darkness and thunder. She didn't think. She just moved. Her boots sank into the wet earth, her skirt catching on brush, the cold rain soaking through every layer. When she reached the ridge, she saw the faint glow of a small fire ahead, a circle of warmth beneath a hide shelter. Talon turned as she appeared at the edge of the light. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain hammered against the hide roof. The flames hissed and danced, and the air between them felt alive, charged with everything they had not said. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I already am," Evelyn whispered. Stepping inside, her shawl clung to her body, heavy with water. Her hair dripped down her back, darkened to the color of mahogany. Talon's gaze flickered briefly once, sharply to her face, then away, as if looking too long might burn him. "Someone will see you," he said. "No one is watching," she replied. "They're too busy fighting the storm." He shook his head. "Storms pass, but words, rumors do not." She took a step closer. Let them talk. Lightning flashed again, painting his face in silver light. His eyes caught the glow like twin embers, wild, uncertain, hungry. You do not understand what you ask of me, he said. I understand enough, she answered. I've lived years pretending not to feel, not to breathe. Tonight, I want to remember what it's like to be alive. For a long moment, the world was only the sound of rain on hide, the low hum of the wind, and the pulse that filled her ears. Then he moved slowly, deliberately closing the distance between them. His hand brushed her wet hair back from her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. She shivered, though not from cold. You are not afraid? He asked quietly. I was, she said, until you looked at me. The words hung there, trembling like the flames. Then his lips found hers, tentative at first, then sure, deep, filled with all the things that could not be spoken in the daylight. The rain outside roared. The wind howled, but in that small space between storm and fire, time seemed to stop. Every breath, every heartbeat, every whisper of touch burned with a desperate tenderness neither could name. When at last they drew apart, Evelyn rested her forehead against his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breath. His heartbeat was steady, strong an anchor against the chaos outside. But even as warmth spread through her, a part of her knew this peace was fragile. The world beyond the tent would not forgive what had just begun. Talon seemed to feel it too. His voice was low, rough. When the sun rises, he said, everything changes. Evelyn closed her eyes. Then let the sun stay hidden a little longer. Outside, the thunder rolled farther away, as if granting them one last moment of stillness before the reckoning to come. The night after the storm, a strange stillness covered the desert. The rain had washed away every footprint, every trace of the struggle between man and nature. The campfire's ashes were cold, and the air smelled faintly of wet cedar and smoke. Evelyn woke first, wrapped in a wool blanket, her hair tangled from the wind. The only sound was the faint drip of water from the tent's edge. Across from her, Kano, the Apache warrior, sat cross-legged beside a stone, sharpening his blade with slow, rhythmic strokes. His long black hair glistened under the pale morning light, and his muscular shoulders bore the marks of the night's fury, faint scratches, smudges of dirt, and the shimmer of rain-dried salt. You didn't sleep, Evelyn said softly. Kano didn't look up. Warriors do not sleep deeply when the spirits are unsettled. She hesitated. And what did they say now? He paused mid-motion, eyes lifting toward the horizon. They whisper of change. The tone in his voice made her heart skip. She'd learned enough about him in the past days. His tribe had been betrayed, his land stolen, his people scattered. Yet despite his pain, there was a calmness in him that defied the cruelty of the world. He was like the land itself, scarred, unyielding, and quietly alive. Evelyn stepped out of the tent and gazed at the landscape. The desert was reborn, green shoots poking through damp earth, sunlight glinting off puddles like shards of glass. It's beautiful, she murmured. Kano joined her, standing close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body. It is a rare thing to see the desert breathe again. His voice, low and deep, carried something ancient in it, a wisdom carved by suffering. Evelyn turned to him. You talk like you've seen the world die and come back. He looked down at her then, his dark eyes meeting hers. Maybe I have. For a moment, the space between them held a quiet electricity, something unspoken, something neither could name. But before words could bridge it, a hawk's cry broke the silence. Kano's gaze shifted sharply to the ridge. He tensed, every muscle in his body alert. What is it? She whispered. Riders, he said. 3 of them. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Are they from your tribe? He shook his head. No, They wear blue coats, soldiers. Panic flickered in her chest. They'll arrest you if they find you here. Kano moved quickly, grabbing his rifle and scanning the ridge. Then they must not find me. Without hesitation, Evelyn stepped forward. Hide in the canyon below. I'll talk to them. He turned to her, surprised. You would do that for me? Her lips trembled. You saved my life. Twice now. It's my turn. For a long moment, he looked at her as though weighing the truth of her words. Then he nodded once. The spirits favor the brave. He vanished into the canyon's shadow, his movements silent as a ghost. Evelyn adjusted her shawl, composed her face, and walked toward the approaching riders. The soldiers stopped their horses a few yards away. Ma'am, the lead officer said, tipping his hat. You alone out here? Yes, she lied. My wagon broke during the storm. I've been waiting for help. The man's gaze scanned the area. We're tracking an Apache scout. Dangerous man. You seen anyone? Her throat tightened, but she met his eyes steadily. No one. Only the wind and the rain. He studied her a moment longer, then tipped his hat again. Stay safe, ma'am. These lands aren't friendly. When they rode off, Evelyn exhaled shakily, her knees weak with relief. From the canyon below, a shadow moved, Kano, silent and watchful, emerging like the spirit of the land itself. You risked your life for me, he said quietly. She met his gaze, the desert breeze tugging at her hair. Maybe the spirits favor the foolish too. He smiled faintly, the first time she'd seen softness touch his face. Or maybe, he said, stepping closer, they favor those who see beyond blood and fear. Under the pale moon rising above the canyon, they stood, two souls bound not by chance, but by the ancient rhythm of survival, trust, and something deeper neither dared to name. The morning sun rose like a blade of fire, slicing through the cool mist that lingered in the canyon. Evelyn woke to the sound of running water, the stream that wound between the red rocks, glimmering like liquid silver. Kano was already awake, crouched by the edge, his reflection rippling in the current. He looked peaceful for once, though his eyes carried that same faraway sorrow, as if he were listening to voices she could never hear. You didn't sleep again, she said softly. Approaching with her blanket wrapped tight, Kano turned his head slightly, offering a faint smile. The desert doesn't sleep, Evelyn. It only pretends to rest. She smiled despite herself. You talk like it's alive. He dipped his hand into the water, watching it swirl around his fingers. It is. Every stone remembers. Every whim carries stories. You just have to listen. Evelyn sat beside him, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. Then what's this place saying now? Kano's gaze lifted toward the canyon walls, towering, painted with streaks of crimson and ochre. It says, this was once a sacred path. My ancestors rode through here when the buffalo still thundered across the plains. His voice grew quiet, reverent. They believed this canyon was where the earth met the spirit world, where the brave came to speak to those who'd crossed over. Evelyn felt the chill rise along her arms. And now? Now it's forgotten, he murmured, buried under white men's maps and railroad lines. For a while, they sat in silence, the sound of water filling the space between them. Evelyn looked at his hands, strong, calloused, carved from labor and war. What will you do now? She asked. You can't keep running. He didn't answer right away. His eyes were distant, scanning the ridges above. There's a fort 3 days east. They took my brother there. If he's alive... His jaw tightened. I'll bring him back. Evelyn's heart clenched. That's suicide, Kano. They'll kill you before you get close. He met her gaze. Then I'll die trying. She wanted to argue, to beg him not to go, but the words wouldn't come. She'd seen that kind of resolve only once before, in her late husband, just before he left for a war that swallowed him whole. Kano rose, towering over her. The morning light gilded his body in bronze and gold, catching the silver of his tribal necklace. "I will go when the sun reaches its peak," he said. "You should head west. There's a trail that leads to a trader's outpost. You'll be safe there." Evelyn stood, her chest tightening. "And what about you? You think I can just walk away?" Kano turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You are not my burden." Her eyes flashed. "You're right. But you're my choice." The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. His gaze softened, the edge of his mouth curving into something fragile. "You're not afraid of dying, are you?" "Not anymore," she said quietly. "Not since the day I met you." Before he could reply, the sound of distant gunfire cracked through the air, faint but unmistakable. Both of them froze. Birds scattered from the cliffs, their cries echoing like alarms. "They found our trail," Kano said, grabbing his rifle. Evelyn's heart pounded. "The soldiers?" "Yes, they move faster than I thought." He scanned the canyon, mind racing. "We can't outrun them on open ground. We'll go through the Spirit Hollow, a narrow pass to the north." Evelyn followed him, stumbling over rocks as dust rose behind them. The canyon walls closed tighter, and the echo of hooves thundered above Dot as they reached a bend. A bullet struck the stone near her head, spraying shards into her hair. She gasped. Kano whirled around, returning fire with precision and fury. "Keep moving," he shouted. They ran, lungs burning, until the canyon opened into a hidden valley, a place untouched by man. Wildflowers bloomed among the stones, and ancient carvings marked the cliffs. Evelyn stopped, breathless. "What is this place?" She whispered. Kano's eyes softened. "The heart of my people." She looked around, all mixing with fear. "Will they follow us here?" He shook his head. "No. The soldiers fear what they don't understand." Then, finally, the tension in his shoulders eased. He turned to her, stepping close. "We rest here," he said, "but only until the sun sleeps." As Evelyn sank against a rock, watching him reload his rifle, she realized something deep and unshakable. The fear that had haunted her for years was gone. The man before her had burned it away, Dot, and though danger pressed closer with every passing hour, she knew one thing with a certainty that felt like destiny. She would not let him face it alone. The sun bled into the horizon like a dying ember, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. Evelyn sat by the edge of the hidden valley, watching the last light fade. Her dress was torn at the hem, her face streaked with dust, but her eyes glowed with something fierce and unwavering. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder rolled, not from the heavens this time, but from the approaching hooves of soldiers. Kano stood a few paces away, his silhouette carved against the firelight. He was sharpening his blade, slow and steady, the rhythmic scrape echoing through the canyon. His bare chest gleamed in the fading light, muscles coiled with tension. The silver pendant around his neck, shaped like an eagle, caught the fire's glow, casting flickers across his skin. "They'll come at dawn," he said without turning. Evelyn swallowed hard. "And if they do?" "Then I'll meet them with the rising sun." His voice was calm, almost serene, but she could hear the quiet storm beneath it, the weight of every loss, every battle he'd fought alone. "Kano." She hesitated. "You don't have to die for revenge." He paused, his hands going still. "It's not revenge," he said softly. "It's remembrance." Evelyn walked toward him, the firelight dancing across her face. "Then let me remember with you," she said. He finally turned, eyes dark as the desert night. For a long moment, they said nothing. The air between them was charged, a collision of fear, fire, and something forbidden. He reached for her hand. You shouldn't be here, and yet I am. The corner of his mouth curved faintly. You're stubborn, only when it matters. They both laughed quietly, a rare sound amid so much danger. It faded quickly when Kano's gaze shifted toward the ridge. The faint outline of riders appeared against the crimson sky. They've found us, he said, grabbing his rifle. Evelyn's pulse raced. How many? Too many. He motioned for her to stay low, but she didn't move. If you fight, I fight, she said. Kano's jaw tightened. If you die, your blood will be on my soul. Then it'll be heavy, she replied. Because I'm not leaving. He stared at her, really stared, and something inside him broke open. You speak like a warrior, he said. Maybe I learned from one. The first gunshot split the silence. A bullet struck a rock near her feet, sending sparks flying. Kano pulled her down and returned fire, his movements swift and fluid, part instinct, part art. His muscles rippled as he reloaded, his long hair whipping in the wind. The soldiers' voices echoed through the canyon, mingling with the cries of hawks above. The battle was chaos. Smoke, thunder, the metallic tang of gunpowder in the air. Evelyn picked up a fallen revolver, her hands trembling but steady enough to aim. She fired once, twice, missing both times. But her defiance was enough to make Kano glance back, a flash of pride in his eyes. Stay behind me, he shouted. Not a chance. She fired again, this time grazing a soldier's arm. The skirmish raged until night fully claimed the canyon. Firelight flickered against the rocks, painting everything in shades of orange and black. When the gunfire finally ceased, only silence remained, heavy, humming, alive. Kano lowered his weapon, breathing hard. Around them lay the shadows of the fallen. Evelyn stumbled toward him, her dress torn, hands shaking. You're hurt, she whispered, seeing the blood on his shoulder. It's nothing, he said through clenched teeth. She tore a strip from her shawl and pressed it against the wound. Don't lie to me. He winced but didn't pull away. You should have run, he said quietly. Evelyn met his gaze, her voice breaking. And leave you to die alone? Never. For the first time, his composure faltered. The hardness in his eyes melted into something raw and human. His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek. You are not like the others, he said softly. You carry fire in your heart. And you carry ghosts in yours, she replied. Maybe together we can burn them away. A long silence followed, broken only by the crackle of dying flames. Kano leaned his forehead against hers, his breath warm, his voice barely a whisper. If the spirits allow it, I will see another dawn with you. She closed her eyes. Then let's live until the sun rises. And as the first faint stars pierced the dark above them, the wounded warrior and the woman who defied the world stood side by side, two souls bound not by fate, but by the fire they refused to let die. The dawn came slowly, crawling over the canyon walls in pale gold streaks that kissed the ash and blood of the night before. The fire had long burned out, leaving only smoke curling into the cold morning air. Evelyn sat beside the embers, her eyes heavy but unblinking, fixed on the horizon. Her hands were still stained with the blood she had used to stop Kano's wound from bleeding through the night. He lay a few feet away, resting against a boulder, his breathing shallow but steady. The rising sun painted his bronze skin in light, catching the beads and feathers of his tribal necklace. His long black hair, tangled and streaked with dust, spilled over his shoulder like ink. Even wounded, he looked unbreakable, like the desert itself had shaped him from its storms and fire. When his eyes opened, they found hers immediately. You stayed awake all night, he said, his voice low, roughened by pain. Evelyn forced a small smile. Didn't want the spirits taking you while I wasn't looking. He gave a faint chuckle, then winced. They'd have a hard time carrying me. She leaned closer, brushing the sweat from his forehead. You lost a lot of blood. You need to rest." Kano's gaze drifted past her toward the ridge where the soldiers had fallen. "Rest comes when the land is quiet," he murmured. "And it isn't quiet yet." Evelyn frowned. "You mean more soldiers?" "No," he said softly. "Something else." She followed his gaze and saw it. In the distance, a group of riders approached slowly from the north, their silhouettes dark against the morning light. But unlike the soldiers, these men rode with calm and purpose. The wind carried the faint sound of bells, feathers rustling, and the deep rhythmic beat of a drum. Kano's eyes softened. "My people." Evelyn stood, heart pounding as the riders descended the ridge. Warriors draped in paint, beads and leather, faces solemn. At their lead rode an elder, his hair silver as moonlight, his eyes deep with knowing. When they stopped before the fire's remains, the elder dismounted and looked at Kano. "You live, brother," he said in Apache, his voice thick with emotion. Kano tried to rise but stumbled. Evelyn caught him, steadying his arm. "Easy," she whispered. The elder's eyes turned to her, studying her face, her torn clothes, the fear and courage written in every line. "You are not of the people," he said in broken English. Evelyn swallowed hard. "No, sir. But I owe your warrior my life." The elder nodded once. "Then you honor him." The others dismounted, surrounding the camp quietly. One of them brought a pouch of herbs and began tending to Kano's wound. Another placed his hand over the fire pit, whispering words Evelyn couldn't understand. Kano watched them, emotion flickering across his face, pride, sorrow, belonging. "I thought you were all gone," he said weakly. The elder smiled faintly. "The desert hides what it loves. We do not vanish, we wait." As they worked, Evelyn stepped back, watching the morning unfold like a dream. She had seen so much death, so much loss, but this was something sacred. A return. A healing. When the elder approached her again, he said quietly, "You walk beside him." That is not a small thing. Evelyn looked at Kano, her voice trembling. "I don't know where I belong anymore." The elder's eyes softened. "Perhaps you already do." Later, as the sun climbed higher, the warriors prepared to move. They built a small stretcher for Kano, but he refused it, standing on his own despite the pain. Evelyn tried to protest, but he placed a hand on her shoulder. "I have walked through fire and storm," he said. "I can walk through mourning too." She smiled through her tears. "And where will you go?" He looked toward the horizon, endless and bright. "Home, to teach those who remain that the spirit of our people still breathes." Evelyn's heart ached. "And me?" Kano hesitated. "You have a home far from here." She stepped closer, eyes shining. "I had one. Until I met you." He touched her face gently, the roughness of his palm warm against her skin. "Then wherever you go, the desert will follow." For a long moment neither spoke. The wind carried the sound of drums again, faint and ancient. She knew this was goodbye, and yet not the kind that ends. As the Apache riders mounted their horses, Kano turned one last time. "Evelyn," he said softly, "the night you came to my fire, I thought it was fate. But now I know it was mercy." She smiled, tears glinting in the sunlight. "Then I'll thank the spirits every dawn." He gave her the eagle pendant from his neck and placed it in her palm. "Keep it, so you remember the man who taught you that even fire can love." Then, without another word, he rode off into the horizon, his long black hair catching the wind, his figure slowly fading into the gold of the desert morning. Evelyn stood alone, the eagle pendant warm in her hand, the echo of hoofbeats fading like a prayer. And as the sun rose higher, she whispered to the wind, "I'll see you again, warrior." The desert answered in silence, but somehow she knew it had heard.